Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm Senate President Warren Peterson. We have Republican lawmakers standing next to me, also, or Republican legislators, excuse me, from both chambers standing next to me. We also have lawmakers who have joined us today. In a minute, you'll be hearing from the chairman of the Senate Committee on Military Affairs, Public Safety, and Border Security, Senator David Gowan. You'll also hear from Senator Janae Shamp, Representative Quan Nguyen, Representative Tim Dunn. These are all legislators that have been heavily involved with border security issues. We'll also hear from Yavapai County Sheriff and President of the Sheriff's Association, David Rhodes, and Sheriff Lamb. We hope that he'll be here soon. We're going to hear from Art Del Cueto of the National Border Patrol Council, Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell, and the GOP Chairman, Gina Swoboda. We're here today because we care about Arizona. We care about the safety of our citizens, and our state's security is in grave jeopardy. The whole nation's security is in jeopardy because of the reckless policies by Joe Biden and his open border crisis. Hundreds of thousands of people are entering the southern border, crossing the southern border illegally. We're no longer having a discussion about Mexico. We're talking about over 100 nations of people crossing into our country illegally. Many of these individuals have been engaged in crimes, serious crimes, like sex trafficking, human smuggling, fentanyl trafficking, rape, murder, high-speed chases, crashes, and other atrocities that have endangered the lives of Arizona citizens. Some of these individuals have even been identified as known terrorists from enemy nations. They've taken advantage of our porous border, and those are just the things that we know about. Criminal cartel rings are recruiting everyday Arizonans and paying them to act as their accomplices, capitalizing on their desperation for money in the middle of this inflation nightmare we're currently living in, also brought on by irresponsible Democrat policies and out-of-control reckless spending in Washington, D.C. Many of the individuals living here illegally are flying under the radar, committing identity theft and fraud to take advantage of the public resources meant specifically for Arizona and U.S. citizens. Your taxpayer dollars are funding this chaos with the blessing of the Biden administration, Democrat lawmakers, and complicity from our own governor. We're in the middle of a crisis, and the Tucson sector of Arizona, spanning some 262 border miles from New Mexico State to Yuma County, has become the epicenter of this lawlessness. Law enforcement has reached their breaking point, putting their lives at risk and on the line. The madness needs to stop. Now, we have been putting a variety of solutions on the governor's desk for the last 2 years. And she has come out and said, she has admitted and said what everybody knows. The federal government is failing us. The federal government is not enforcing their laws. But then we put bills on her desk and she has vetoed them. So what we are going to do is we are putting border security policy to the voters. The voters are going to get the opportunity to decide border security issues and safety for this state. They're going to be able to decide to keep Arizona safe. Doing nothing is not an option. So with that, we're going to hear a lot more details and hear from other speakers, and then we'll open it up for a few questions. One thing I do want to mention just right up front, this is truly a border security bill. This is not SB 1070, where you're talking about things happening all over the state. This is what is happening at the border. The effect of this bill is what happens at the border, evidence at the border. So that, let's hear from our chairman of the Border Security Committee.
Sheriff Rhodes, come on up.
Oh, and Sheriff Rhodes is here, so come join us, Sheriff. He wanted to make a grand entrance.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you for showing up here today. And I want to throw a little appreciation out to the press. When I made my last request that you guys come down, I was able to get a few of you to the border and see the things that are happening right down there in Cochise County. I would say, going back to our thoughts, when the federal government fails in its duties, protect its citizens and its borders, then those duties fall to us at the state. And we've had a lot of hindrance from the federal side. And you're seeing that in Iowa right now. You're seeing that in Texas, which this bill is mirrored on a bit. So when I talk about this bill, it goes into effect if the people pass this, when they pass it, 60 days after the Texas law takes its own effect. So we're waiting on what our federal government decides they need to do, I guess, in the court system. So remember that. That's part of the rule of this piece, at least in the section we're talking about when we talk about the border issue itself. So again, I'll reach out again. You want to come down and see the border down there? Definitely come down. We'll get a little tour going and you can see what's happening firsthand, not just in the press, right? Oh, wait. We'll get you guys down. So the Secure the Border Act is an effort to protect our citizens in Arizona's communities, like I've been talking about, and by allowing local, county, state officials to intercede, take the actions they need, the job that they should be doing that the federal government isn't doing, and helps this state and its communities. This policy was crafted with input from our sheriffs, from our police, from our troopers, from our law enforcement entities, and we're putting this together, making it a priority for the great state of Arizona and its citizens. The plan is to adopt a Strike Everything Amendment, which you guys know as HCR 2060, in the committee today that I have. This measure has several elements that once it passes out of this legislature, voters will have the opportunity to consider on their ballots in November election, and you heard that from the president. So this goes directly straight to the people, and they get to say yes or no, and then we'll follow the law, right? Follow the law, what the people give to us. Secure the Border Act is based on the Texas law that would allow our local law enforcement to arrest certain non-U.S. citizens who cross into Arizona illegally from Mexico. And that's outside of the port of entry, and establishing this as an action for state crime. So if a person charged with this state crime agrees to return to Mexico, however, the court will be able to issue an order to return, and the charges will just be dismissed. You go through the port of entry. This mirrors federal law, just so everybody understands. This is a federal law piece. We're just mirroring the federal law and giving our officers that ability, which they want that duty. If a person is convicted of this state and they don't choose to go back, they will go to court, and whatever action is taken there, any jail time, what have you, after that jail time, after what the judge imposes, then they will be ordered to go back home, even after that. So since the Texas law we're basing this policy off of is currently on hold while it's being litigated in federal court, these provisions will only take effect, as I stated early, in Arizona, if we have a court ruling, and if that goes right into law itself. So we're looking at all that. Additionally, the Secure the Border Act will also create tougher penalties against drug traffickers who sell fentanyl here, and any effects of fentanyl coming across. People can be charged with murder with that. Class 2 felony. We need to do something against this heinous crime. It's almost a hidden crime. You see people dying from it. I remember going into the basement in the house to observe what's happening in San Bernardino. We had a group bring in some deputies and showing a video on there of what happened to them. And they opened up the back of a pickup with fentanyl in it, opened the bag, and the officer collapsed on the highway. And while they were in the ambulance, they didn't OD, but the stuff OD'd them 2 times on the way to the hospital. That's how powerful fentanyl is. And they didn't even ingest it. Just the fumes of that. This stuff is dangerous, and we all know it. We need to do something about it. Additionally, the measure will make it a state crime for a person who's living in Arizona illegally to knowingly submit false information or documents to apply for government benefits or apply for employment. And it's all on that person who is committing a crime. So this follows what we have in state law already, and it's going to codify it. So that's what this measure does. Look forward to seeing you guys in committee just as well, and we'll be taking some testimony. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to today's vice chair, Madam Champner.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate everyone being here today, especially our sheriffs and all of our law enforcement that is here. I can't thank you guys enough, all of you, for what you do. For those of you that don't know, my name is Senator Janae Shamp, and I represent Legislative District 29. And I sponsored SB 1231 this session to make it illegal by state law to enter our country from a foreign nation at any other point other than a lawful port of entry. That bill was modeled after Texas's SB 4, and it was vetoed by Governor Hobbs. I'm proud that we're including much of that language in the Secure the Border Act so that we can send this to the ballot, to the citizens, we the people. They will have the chance to decide whether to do something or sit back and watch as our country deteriorates from border-related crimes and the influx of illegals too large for our cities to handle. And from all of the polling data that's out there, from all of the constituent emails and phone calls I'm getting, I guarantee you it is the #1 issue on the hearts and minds of the citizens of Arizona and across this country. Every state is a border state. And God bless Laken Riley and her family. It's Nurses Week. And we've been robbed of an incredible nurse. During the Biden administration, it's estimated that around 10 million illegal aliens have entered our country illegally from our southwest border. This includes criminals, terrorists, and hundreds of thousands of children who are victims of human and sex trafficking. From 2021 to 2023, U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered nearly 300 individuals on the terrorist watch list. They are illegally entering our country between ports of entry along our southwest border. That's a 3,033% increase over the previous 3 years. Let that sink in. 3,000. This percentage increase of terrorists that want to come into our country are here to murder Americans and destroy America. And they're entering right through our southern border. During this time, the number of unaccompanied minors illegally crossing the southwest border reached 400,000. Most are victims of human and sex trafficking, and that should horrify everyone in this room and everyone watching at home. Meanwhile, the amount of fentanyl seized at our border has almost tripled, amounting to billions of doses of fentanyl. Even a single dose can be deadly. It can be deadly via inhalation when a bag is opened. It can be deadly with just one pill. It shouldn't come to anyone's surprise that we've also seen the highest number of overdose deaths in our nation's history. I've told the story before, but having to do CPR on a 3-year-old little girl who merely picked up a pill that was left on her front porch, this hits home. The fact that there's any pushback on that is insulting to the family of that little girl and many others. One overdose death, one victim of child sex trafficking, one terrorist plotting to destroy America from within our country is one too many. This is a crisis. Let me repeat that. This is a crisis. And these numbers will not be ignored. Lastly, human smuggling often leads to other crimes, such as identity theft, one of the fastest growing financial crimes in America. It has impacted tens of thousands of Arizonans over the last few years. Other crimes include document fraud and benefit fraud, which become the unfair burden of Arizona citizens, hardworking, tax-paying citizens. These issues of theft and fraud will be addressed in the Border Act. I love America, and I love the great 48, Arizona. And I'm going to continue to keep fighting for our communities to make it safe from the invasion at our border. And if the federal government will not protect the citizens of Arizona, the states must do their duty. And ultimately, Arizonans will get to decide the fate as it relates to these border crimes come November. Thank you very much. Representative Nguyen.
Thank you. Thank you to all my friends back here. Thank you for being here to support me. Good afternoon. My name is Representative Quang Nguyen, House Judiciary Chair, Legislative District 1. I don't even recognize the country I immigrated to at 49 years ago. Our southern border is wide open, out of control, and we don't even know who's coming in and for what reason. And I sense a majority of these illegal aliens are not here to make this country better, and it has become unsustainable. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because it took me 8.5 years to gain US citizenship. I came after the war in 1975, where millions of people killed. And with an act of Congress that put me here, I had to follow every single immigration law to be where I am today. To be able to stand here today, I had to follow every bit of it. And why did it take 8.5 years? It took 8.5 years because this place is extremely special. It is more special than anywhere that I have seen, and I've been somewhere else 12,000 miles away. So I want to make sure that people understand that when you circumvent the system and you get here and you claim to be a US citizen, it's a slap on my face because of all the hardship that I had to go through. HCR 2060 is a thoughtful and is a comprehensive approach to combating illegal immigration, which is a top priority for Republicans in both houses, both chambers. Both sides of the aisles, believe it or not, I've spoken to both sides of the aisles. When you hear meaningful reform, and I heard that for so many years, and this bill is designed to protect Arizona workforce and strengthen Arizona criminal laws. It creates 2 new class 6 felonies for illegal aliens who submit false documents and information to evade, e-verify, or obtain taxpayer-funded public benefits. Let's talk about public benefits for a little bit. Those things were not available to me until I could prove that I am a good citizen, a legal alien. This bill will require state and local agencies to verify non-citizens' documents and benefit eligibility through a federal database known as the SAVE program whenever non-citizens apply for public benefits. It creates a new Class 2 felony to enhance sentences for drug dealers of illicit and deadly fentanyl. I'm especially excited about this fentanyl provision because it took me 3.5 years to be able to get 2245 to where it is today. So along with this provision and the amount of fentanyl, the threshold that would send you to jail automatically, I'm totally excited about it. HCR 2060 incorporated legislation which all House Republicans co-sponsored, but Governor Hobbs veto. That is modeled after Texas Senate Bill 4, making it a crime for an illegal alien to enter or attempt to enter Arizona at any location than a lawful point of entry, and empowering Arizona courts to issue orders to return the persons to the foreign nation. So I'm just proud to be here as an American citizen, and I actually can tell you I earned my spot. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Tim Dunn from Legislative District 25, which goes from Yuma to the West Valley. Yuma is where I was born and raised, and we have a farming operation. Americans are fed up of the lip service they've been hearing for the last 4 years. And Arizonans expect their legislators and their elected officials to do something. And we're here with my colleagues today to do something because we have to stand up against the Biden administration and let Arizona citizens vote on something that's going to put the fentanyl in jail and put illegal aliens on track to be returned and or come through a legal port of entry. Being in Yuma, we have dealt with this for many decades. We provide the nation's produce with legal immigrants that come across daily. It can be done. There's a legal way to do things. Like Quan Nguyen said, there's a legal way to do things. We expect more. Do not come to the desert. One of the things you'll hear from the sheriffs, but you don't see on TV, is what's going on in the deserts. Our sheriffs are picking up illegals that are dead, that are left in the desert. That is not a humane way of treating people when you're trying to come to this country. They're finding them dead, they're being molested, and it's not the correct way to treat people if you want to come to our country. Come the legal way. This bill is going to allow that to happen, and Arizonans expect more, and we're going to let you have this bill to vote on it in November.
Thank you, Tim. Sure.
I think it's Sheriff Price.
Yeah. Oh, you're up.
You're up.
on deck.
Thanks for being here, Sheriff.
Absolutely. David Rhodes, Yavapai County Sheriff, President of the Arizona Sheriff's Association. I was thinking about how did we get here? Why do we have to contemplate this kind of legislation, this kind of ballot initiative? Why do we have to consider spending state money, state taxpayer dollars to offset a failure of our federal government when we already pay so much in federal taxes? But that's where we're at. The sheriffs down on the border, they deal with this every single day, and they have been asking for tools. They have been asking for resources. They have been asking for anything that they can get, as well as the rest of the sheriffs in the state, to deal with this crisis. And it's only getting worse. It is only getting worse. And we hear every day from our constituents, people across this state, they say, sheriffs, what are you doing? Sheriff, what are you doing to combat the wide open border? What are you doing for border security? How are you going to protect these communities? How are you going to make sure that we're safe? What tools do you need? Then they ask, what can we do? I hear that every single day. What can we do to help you combat this situation? Well, finally, today, this is something that they can do. They can decide in November, should this ballot proposition pass the legislature, get placed on the ballot, they can decide. They will have a voice in their own future, their own security, and whatnot. Now, you're going to ask a lot of questions that we don't necessarily have the answers to. I've asked my legislative friends the questions. Where is the money going to come from? How are we going to stand up public safety infrastructure? Where are we going to hold people that have been arrested? How are we going to deal with women, children, different people that are coming in? Thank you. How are we going to do these things? And there's not a lot of answers at the moment. We're working through it. But I have confidence in our elected officials. I have confidence that they're going to continue to work with us to put together something that is usable, workable, effective, properly funded, should the citizens of this state make this determination that they want to self-direct their own public safety. So today we're going to be at the committee hearing. We're looking forward to the discussion. We're looking forward to the discussion moving forward, working on the final language of this bill. And we will be here all afternoon. And I want to thank Sheriff Will Ponce of La Paz County, who is here. Sheriff David Klaus of Navajo County, who is here, is the Vice President of the Arizona Sheriff's Association. We'll all be here today to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Good afternoon. My name is Art Del Cueto. I'm Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council. This bill would be extremely helpful. And again, it puts it in the hands of the voters. The voters get to decide. You get to say what you want and what you don't want, and that's what's extremely important. Currently, Arizona is getting inundated with the groups that are coming across the border. I know a lot of you guys see the news and you see what's happening in Texas, but I can tell you, as horrific as that last video was of 300 individuals that stormed an area in El Paso, that same weekend, there was over 3,000 that came across Arizona. But you don't see that because a lot of the media is not able to go down there and they don't see what's happening on the Tohono O'odham Reservation. That's an area where I've brought different reporters and they still continue to see carpet shoes and black bottles. And I'll tell you, a lot of those black bottles, those are used so you don't get detained, so you can evade apprehension, so you can evade them even knowing you're coming across, as well as carpet shoes. Carpet shoes are the carpets that they put underneath their shoe. That way, you're not able to count how many individuals are coming across. The majority of the agents are stuck in processing centers, and although that is part of their job, enforcing our nation's borders also happens to be part of their job, and they're not able to do that because of the policies of the current administration. So we continue to see groups coming across nonstop. The amount of fentanyl and drugs that are coming into the United States, truly what you see is based on individuals that are apprehended with the drugs and or ODs, but you don't know how much drugs is coming across because you don't have the manpower out there anymore to count who's getting away and who's not getting away. What they are estimating right now, according to reports, is they're estimating in Tucson sector, they're looking at 200 gotaways a day. But that's just an estimate because, as I said, they're using different methods not to be apprehended. They're also using different methods not to be detected. And that's something that we continue to see. You don't see what's happening in Arizona because a lot of the media doesn't show it to you. The focus is somewhere else. But I can tell you, Tucson continues to be at the top of the list with apprehensions. It continues to be at the top of the list with gotaways. And the gotaways are the one thing that really should scare everybody. It is so easy to come into the United States right now, even in between the ports, turn yourself into law enforcement, ask for asylum, and you know you're going to get released. So ask yourself, what could be the intentions of the individuals that are going the extra steps not to get detected and not to be apprehended? And that's the huge problem. The drug cartels, I've said it before, they control the southern border. They know when groups are coming and where they're coming across. You always see these large caravans of 1,000 plus that are forming and coming up to the border, but you rarely see those caravans of 1,000 plus that enter in one specific spot. And that is because the cartels divide those individuals and they put them in the places that they want to place them. That's the reality. That's the cold, hard facts. The drug dealers don't care who's buying their fentanyl. You could be on the right side of the aisle or the left side of the aisle. They just want to make money, and they're making tons of money right now because of the lack of border enforcement policies. Para la gente de habla hispana, es importante hablar de esta propuesta también a las personas que hablan español dentro de este estado y dentro de este país. Acuérdense que los carteles de las drogas, a ellos no les importa quién está comprando sus drogas. Ellos lo que les importa es vender esa droga, y las familias que están en Estados Unidos de habla hispana también tienen sus hijos y sus parientes y diferentes familiares problemas con estas drogas que están invadiendo diferentes vecindades y diferentes escuelas. Esta propuesta se la pone en la mano de los votantes para que los votantes decidan si quieren algo correcto en Arizona para defender, para poder tener leyes de parar el crimen que constantemente nos está invadiendo. Es todo lo que es. Se lo deja en la mano de los votantes. Thank you very much.
Tonight at 6 o'clock, my office is going to be partnering with Not My Kid to hold yet another fentanyl forum. And what we do at these forums is we educate parents and we educate kids and those who work with kids on the dangers of fentanyl. And we tell them this is not a drug, this is a poison coming across our border. Tonight at that forum, there's a couple that will be speaking, a couple who lost their son, who took what he thought was something else, and it turned out to be fentanyl, and he died. Every single time we do a forum, people come forward and talk about losing their young ones, their children. So I want to thank the Arizona Senate and House Republicans for taking action on this issue. I know it's going to be perceived as controversial, but here's what I would say. Come up with a solution then. Don't just criticize. Come up with a solution, because our people in Arizona are dying. I also want to thank our law enforcement partners throughout the state, especially our Border Patrol agents who are reeling from this devastating impact. You know, a few weeks ago, I went down to the border and I met with the Cochise County Sheriff and the attorneys down there to get a briefing on the details of what's happening right now. And they are overwhelmed. They are overwhelmed with high-speed cars going through their jurisdiction, with fentanyl coming over the border, through the ports that are not manned, in between the ports. It's unbelievable. We heard cases about young individuals from here that are being recruited by cartel members to work for them. They're being offered money, and they go down and they change their lives forever because they will never get rid of the blood that's on their hands from carrying this poison back into our society. Just last year, I've talked about this before, 2 young sisters from here went across the border and they carried back 850,000 pills. And they're in prison now. Because what do you do with people who are willing to bring poison into our community and kill our people? Young adults are picking up fentanyl loads. Just last year, we put a heat map together. Heat map shows where the concentration of cases is happening in Maricopa County. And we compared 2022 to 2023, and it is a stark difference. In 2022, the heat map lit up primarily along the I-17 corridor and the I-10 corridor to the west of the I-17, and then in the East Valley and the Mesa area. If you look at the heat map from 2023, it's all over. It is a massive problem. And again, people are dying. Our people are dying. Yesterday was National Fentanyl Awareness Day. Every day, we lose in Maricopa County 3 people to a fentanyl overdose. Last year alone, in the United States, 70,000 Americans lost their lives to illegally made fentanyl. When I started in office 2 years ago, the DEA told us that 6 out of 10 pills coming across the border had a potentially lethal dose. Now they're saying it's 7 out of 10. Multiply that times 850,000 pills. Since 2018, only 6 years ago, my office saw an increase of over 6,750% fentanyl-related cases submitted to my office. This includes possession, but it also includes sale, transport, and manufacture. Joe Biden's DEA will tell you themselves that of all the fentanyl seized in the United States in 2022 and 2023, over half of it was seized in Arizona. We are ground zero, and this is appalling. This is not about partisanship. Fentanyl doesn't care if you have an R or a D after your name. They don't care where you came from. It just is a poison that is infiltrating our community, and it has to be stopped. There are some places that are not willing to stand up to this. Arizona is not one of those places. And Maricopa County certainly is not one of those places who will stand up to the people who would kill our people and bring this poison across our border. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. I'm Gina Swoboda. I am the... Is it on? Don't touch it. Thank you, Kim. I'm Gina Swoboda. I'm the chair of the Republican Party of Arizona. I am thankful for the legislature and the majority that is putting these bills forward. I am very thankful for law enforcement that is helping to protect the people of Arizona and the United States. The Biden administration has failed. to do so. We're going to have a presidential election, and the people will determine at that point whether or not they think it's a good idea to leave the border open. But in the meantime, we have a responsibility to interdict the people that are crossing over outside the ports of entry. If you're seeking refuge, you're coming through the ports of entry, right? Because you're reporting your presence and you're looking to become a part of this country. If you're crossing over outside those ports of entry, that's unlawful. These people need to be interdicted for their protection and for the protection of everybody here. That's what this bill is doing. It's up to the people now to make a decision about how they want that enforced. Fentanyl is a disaster, and it's a crisis, and it's just killing people in the streets. So I don't know what anybody thinks the plan is. I have not observed there to be a plan from the federal government at this point, from that administration. Governor Hobbs has failed to act on the multiple options that have been sent to her desk to help protect the people of Arizona. This is what the people of Arizona are asking for. That's what we're going to deliver. Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah, we'll open it up for some questions.
Let me ask our Yavapai Sheriff.
Okay.
Because you're involved in this. One of the issues that's come up is it makes it a crime to have entered the United States as a legal alien at any place other than the port of entry. You're up in Yavapai County. So how would your officers enforce something like that? Since I'm assuming they're not seeing people come across, and will this lead to racial profiling?
So that's a great question, and that's obviously one of the biggest concerns that's going to come up with any type of legislation like this, right? And the law is a two-part test. There has to be probable cause that you entered not at a port of entry and that you're an alien, correct? And so to make that contact with somebody, you have to have probable cause, in our view, that somebody entered not at a port of entry. So what does that look like? The sheriffs view this as primarily a border bill because you're seeing people coming across. You have eyewitness testimony that people came across. You have technology that indicates that people came across. You're responding to 911 calls for search and rescue or different things, and you find groups of people out in the desert where there's no port of entry for miles and miles. These are all instances of probable cause where somebody entered not at a port of entry, which would then allow for the questioning as to the legal status. And determination of legal status still requires local law enforcement be able to work with our federal partners. And we have to be able to have that other part of the test, the probable cause, right? Yes, sir.
So let me just make sure that absent somebody seeing someone come across, somebody found in the desert, far from the port of entry, your officers come across somebody in Chino Valley.
If there's no probable cause that that person entered the country not at a port of entry, then there's no reason to initiate that contact. You need to have probable cause that somebody entered at a port of entry. And I want to be clear to the public about that. This is not licensed to make 911 calls repeatedly because you see somebody that you think is in the country illegally. There has to be probable cause that they entered not at an official port of entry. If there's a hole in the fence or a place where the fence doesn't exist, or, you know, when I toured the border down there, there's ladders literally in the bushes on the other side that are used to come up over the top of the wall. There's huge floodgates down there we drove by that are left open. Shockingly, they're left open for flooding, for wildlife traversing and whatnot. People that come through that's not an official port of entry. And I think that everybody needs to understand the intent of this bill is not to, in any way, in our view, in the sheriff's view, usurp the ability of the federal government to set policy around how they're going to take asylum requests. It is simply to drive all of that traffic to official ports of entry, lawful crossing of the border. So I want to be super clear about that. That's the view of the sheriffs. That's how we see this working. We don't see this working any other way.
Well said. Bill that requires 30 days in jail for the immigrants. Where will they be held? And can you speak a little bit, maybe President Peterson or someone else can speak to what is the true cost of this bill going to be eventually?
Well, that's a good question because We don't know right now. You have county jails down there, and depending on how many people are arrested, how many people are incarcerated, how many people are held, that'll determine where they're going to be held and what those facilities look like and what the cost is going to be. The sheriffs have in very clear terms articulated to everybody our concerns about the cost, not only to the sheriff's office, but to the local public safety infrastructure. This can't be put on the backs of the counties. Now, I will say this. If the voters choose, and they should have the right to choose, and the sheriffs will always stand on the side of the voters. If they choose, we will be calling on all elected officials with the purse strings to come to the table and fund the will of the voters. That is a key part of this, I think, that everybody needs to understand.
So just a couple things there. First of all, Howie, there's no room in your story to spend for racial profiling. That's not in this bill. As far as funding goes, the legislature has funded public safety. It's one of the top priorities of government. We will always fund public safety. Obviously, you know what the true costs are? The true costs is the law breaking and the insane amount of people that we are going to save money by creating a deterrence. We are going to send a clear message. If you want to enter the country illegally and break the law, it's going to have to be in a different state. It's not going to happen in Arizona. We're going to send the message. If you want to sell fentanyl and risk going to prison for felony murder, you're not going to want to. You're not going to want to risk that. Okay? We're going to send the message you can't sell fentanyl in Arizona, because if you do, the penalties are severe. Those people are going to have to go somewhere else, to a different state, to sell fentanyl. Yes, sir.
What's your response to some of the business owners that gathered earlier today who said this is going to further exacerbate employment problems in the state, trades, construction, things that are
I'm glad you asked that question. We are hearing from business owners, okay? And our business owners are telling us to protect the border. This is truly a border security bill. It does nothing with businesses. Even the law that we mentioned with benefits, that's already actually state law. That's current law right now. We're simply voter protecting that law. So there is this small group of people that maybe spoke earlier. They're quite frankly, what they're saying is not accurate. This will make it better for business, safer for business. One of the key things, you know why people risk their lives to come to our country and to come to Arizona? Because they know their property will be protected. Their business will be protected. They can go make a living and work. They can live in a neighborhood and be safe. Well, what's happening with all of this? Now we're hearing about these gangs that are, I think the county where's Rachel at? Oh, she left. Okay. Well, recently they prosecuted somebody who's been going home to home. They're here illegally. Chilean gang. And we're hearing about all these crimes that are happening. Us stopping this and deterring this is hundreds of millions of dollars in crime. We're stopping that. That's saving money. We can certainly have the money. Yes.
Yet Danny Seiden said...
You've had your two questions. Yes, sir. No. Yes, sir.
I don't mean to put Cody or someone else from Cochise County on the spot, but I had a question as to how this would impact SABRE and then border operations and local offices, whether they need to hire more officers and how they're prepping.
Well, as I mentioned in my statement, it's not crystal clear exactly how it's going to impact. If it serves as the deterrent that we hope that it's going to serve as, then you have to add less resources. To President Peterson's point, you're trying to create a deterrent. As far as Cochise County goes, I have no doubt that they're going to have to hire more deputies, more detention staff, have more resources. Pima County, Santa Cruz, Yuma, everybody needs to understand that, but it's not clear right now. We'll have to wait and work through that.
Yeah, if you have people coming into our country breaking all these laws, guess who has to deal with that? Law enforcement. That costs money. Yes, sir.
President Peterson, you brought up SB 1070. Can you tell the voters how this will be different?
Yeah. So one of the key differences here is this is truly a border security bill. It is focused on, as the sheriff mentioned, evidence at the border. Somebody said, oh, well, does that mean a police officer in Gilbert is going to ask you for your papers? No, that's not what that means. The only way you could possibly, there's probably another scenario, but the only scenario I can think of where you're in Flagstaff or Gilbert or somewhere and somebody could be prosecuted for this is if there's a video of you coming into the country illegally. What we are doing here is literally we have reached the point because the federal government, people are just walking in. What can we do since the federal government has completely opened our border to our state? This is the deterrent. We can, if we want to, with this bill, we can go down to the border. We can send law enforcement to the border. We can do a lot of things. This is a new tool, okay? And how it's enforced, that's, we'll see, that's part of what we work with law enforcement doing. We can literally now go down to the border, and if people come across illegally, they can now be detained, arrested, and, so anyways, that's how it's different. SB 1070 was more of, you could ask for people's papers. There's not a scenario where that's happening here. Yes, Bram.
That's for Mr. Del Cueto, if I can.
Sure.
Sir, you were at a congressional field hearing back in February, 2 months ago.
Yep.
Where you practically pleaded with members of Congress there to support the border security bill. That was before them. Ultimately, President Trump said, don't support it, and nothing happened. Would we be here today if that border security bill had passed?
Well, honestly, I was, and I continue to stand up and say I was in favor of that bill. I didn't plead, but I understand what you're saying. So I think it was a valuable tool that should have gone up, and they should have made the proper amendments. I was neither the National Border Patrol Council, they never said that it was a perfect bill. We never said it was a perfect bill. What we wanted was for that bill to be moved up and for them to make the amendments that were necessary to control the border. That's the reality of that bill.
Mr. Del Cueto, now that you're up there, can you respond a couple in Spanish for us?
Sure.
¿Qué es la diferencia entre esta propuesta y la SB 1070 en el 2010? Y también cómo se evita ese aspecto de que puede considerarse perfil racial el detener a una persona y posiblemente ponerla en un proceso de deportación.
La diferencia es que para empezar, esta es una propuesta que se le van a dar a los votantes para que ellos puedan hacer la determinación, ¿verdad? Correcto. Entonces, y la diferencia también sería que no están nomás parando a individuos, como decían en el SB 1070, por cualquier otro método. Esta propuesta es algo que sería enforzada durante la línea fronteriza, dentro de la línea. Es otra herramienta que le podría ayudar a los diferentes agencias policíacas. Entonces, esa sería la gran diferencia. ¿Me repite la segunda pregunta?
La segunda, la parte de cómo puede percibirse
como
perfil racial,
sí.
de cómo van a identificar a una persona que piensan está en el país de manera irregular.
Correcto. No, pues, como dijeron los oficiales, no están parando a unas personas nomás por perfil racial, para empezar, ¿verdad? Otra cosa que es muy importante que la gente debe de entender es que la patrulla fronteriza, ellos, no lo digo yo, ellos los han reportado, que han arrestado personas de 168 diferentes países. Entonces, esto simple y sencillamente no es una propuesta que ataca a los migrantes. ¿Cómo se puede evitar que sea algo racial? La forma de evitarlo está en las manos de ustedes. Ustedes como la prensa deben de reportar la diferencia en la propuesta anterior y esta propuesta. Y para que la gente se sienta segura que esto no es algo racial y al mismo tiempo los cárteles de las drogas y las drogas que están entrando dentro de este país no simple y sencillamente se la están vendiendo a un grupo de personas basados a de qué parte del país o de qué parte del mundo son. Los cárteles de drogas están vendiéndole las drogas a todos los individuos y están invadiendo las escuelas de diferentes partes del mundo.
Por último, Bishop mencionó que están actualmente muchos de los alguaciles cerca de la frontera con mucho trabajo por procesar a personas que están en el país de manera irregular. ¿Cómo esto podría agregar a ese trabajo y también qué recursos van a tener para ellos? ¿Ustedes cómo van a abordar ese tema del presupuesto?
Ok, en esa parte sería más tocante la pregunta hacia los alguaciles, pero sí respondieron anteriormente y dijeron que tendrían que ver las propuestas monetarias para poder traer más agentes, más policías y más áreas donde podrían procesar a esos individuos.
All right. Thank you. We're going to the hearing.
Thank you. No.
One more question from the media.
Looking at this as a measure of deterrence, we've had.
Ma'am, who are you with?
ABC 15.
ABC 15, go ahead.
Yes, so I have a question about the fentanyl portion of the bill.
Yeah.
Given that this bill is dependent on the Texas law becoming law and becoming enforceable.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why it's included in this instead of put forward as a separate?
Yeah, so the fentanyl portion would not be tied to the Texas law. That would not. It's just the portion about the following the SB4 model. If SB4 goes into effect, is held constitutional, then we follow that. But the fentanyl portion is separate. Also, the portion about benefits that's already state law, that is not dependent. That's not conditional like the other one is. Thank you all for coming. We'll be happy to answer some individual questions as we break up here.